March 2000, when the U.S. Air Force grounded hundreds of KC-135 jet tankers to fix problems in their tail feathers, chemtrail sightings across the United States dropped from 24 locations to just 2. As the big jets were returned to service over the following week, chemtrail activity climbed right back to previous levels.
While highly speculative, some researchers suggest these strange cloud formations are another agent of weather warfare.
Chemtrails are deliberately sprayed by high-flying U.S. Air Force tankers, dispersing chemicals into the atmosphere.
Will Thomas has authored a book about chemtrails. Since the late 1990s, he has worked closely with another journalist in investigating these strange patterns that appear in the sky. The theory is that chemtrails are being used in conjunction with HAARP. By spraying metal oxides into the air above enemy skies, then directing ELF waves from HAARP to heat those metal oxides, the temperature of the sky is raised to more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, preventing the accumulation of water vapor that would otherwise form clouds and produce rainfall.
It's not all good in the neighborhood when the air is so thick you can't breathe like you should, and then you look up into that hazy sky to see another jet spraying something long and wide. Ooh, they fly a long, long way. They're up there day to day, yeah. Till you short of breath and wondering, how can our children play? Yeah. Well, the tests came back about the chemtrail hack, where they're trying to dim the sun. We get a drought instead.
There is a growing citizens movement demanding an explanation of chemtrails.
And I talked to my NSA buddies at Fort Carson, Peterson Air Force Base, and Buckley, where I was actually their doctor taking care of the pilots flying and spraying the chemtrails. So I know it's real. If anybody says it's not real, they're full of it.
It's not the same as conducting some localized test for some defensive project. This is open air operations. It's not a test. This thing is in place.
They fly a long, long way. They're up there day to day, yeah. Short of breath, wondering, how can our children play? Yeah. Well, the tests came back about the chemtrail hack, where they're trying to dim the sun. We get a drought instead. It's aluminum, that's not all, in its barium, and other things that kill the trees and the life in the ground. Ooh, they fly a long, long way. They're up there day to day, yeah.
Talking about this a few years ago was extremely dangerous. Now that we have YouTube and more social networking devices, such as even Rupert's MySpace, this is really getting out in such a way that they can't control it. Talking about the elephant in the room, what is so obvious to all of us.
There's a feeling from that area that the state doing all of these weather modification programs might not be doing it for the benefit of the citizens of Texas and other states that they may impact as well.
Well, many of the planes that we're seeing here in Abilene will actually turn whatever they're spraying on and off right before our eyes. I mean, you'll see a plane up there flying like normal, and then all of a sudden it starts spraying. We've seen them fly off into the distance and then loop around and fly back again. These are not your typical planes with a preordained path destination from city to city. Someone needs to explain to me why do they stop traveling in one particular direction and then loop around and come back again. They perform this behavior so many times that we start seeing the tic-tac-toe grids in the sky. We're witnessing the giant X's. And I mean, Rosalind, when you and I grew up, these contrails naturally dissipated in a few seconds or perhaps a minute max. But these things expand, they grow bigger, and before you know it, the entire sky is overcast.
That's correct. And they are there all day. They do loop the loop around our county and our state. We follow them at times with spotters in different areas, watching the planes loop, come back around. And we know from the FAA records that the jets from commercial airlines fly in straight lines. And coming across our county, there aren't many, and they stay mostly in certain patterns. The jets that we see leaving the persistent jet contrails move in directions that normal jets wouldn't fly because it would use too much fuel and put them off schedule.
On this Thursday, we had a little cloud cover in the morning hours. Now, this first portion of the radar cycle, fairly bland and typical, but then you see these bands of very distinct cloud cover moving into the region. That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic, or even metallicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
Ooh, they fly a long, long way. They're up there day to day, yeah. Do you show the press and wondering how can our children play? Well, the test came back about the chemtrail hack, where they're trying to dim the sun. We get a drought instead. It's aluminum, that's not all, in its thorium, and other things that kill the trees and the life in the ground.
You believe that this is a full-scale secret operation that includes not only the U.S. but Europe and the rest of the world?
Well, that's apparent because you can see the pictures from all over the world, and I get them constantly. Some areas are worse than others. The excuse for this is, number one, weather modification, number two, to save us from global warming, and number three, to save us from the terrorists. The problem with that is the terrorists don't have the means to deliver this. They don't have the access to deliver this over the American populace, per se. And the only people who have been doing this, that is biological experiments on the American people, is the military themselves, which has been admitted.
It is expected that there will be increased mortality as well as the potential of a huge host of unknown pathogens that we are subject to. And this is not based on speculation. There's a whole arena of biological research that we haven't even begun to touch on.
Could a strange substance found by a Southwest Arkansas man be part of a government
found in our sample?
The community of the San Bernardino Mountains has a real mystery on its hands. The official explanation here is that jet contrails are causing strange lines in the sky.
What effects
and
barium has on the body. Short-term exposure can lead to anything from stomach to chest pains. Long-term exposure causes blood pressure problems. Ryan addressed concerns by chemtrail researchers that barium could be meant to wear down a person's immune system.
You're talking about dominating our air supply without the human consent in a way that is difficult for many of us certainly to conceive, and certainly many of us refuse to accept it even in the light of sufficient and overwhelming evidence.
Well, you can't deny what you see with your own eyes, what you breathe with your lungs, what you see in the sky. You know the climate changes, they can make it dry, they can make it rain, or they can make things die. One day we'll wake up then we'll ground them jets. Let Mother Nature have her weather back. Ooh, they fly a long, long way. They're up there day to day. You go to breath and wonder, how can our children stray?
FedEx 5034, request seat line level 340. FedEx 5034, is there any room on this one? Roger, FedEx 5034. FedEx 062, contact 119, good one. 119, good one. 062, good one.
Chasing all our rain away, what water's left, they make us pay for recycling crap. Yeah, they turned off the tap, so look around, trees are down, and the sky is a hazy shade of chemtrails. Hang on to your breath, my friend. Smoking cigs with cyanide might just be a better ride than what we've been sent. Now our lungs are all spent.
Oh, it covered the entire Cedar Glen area.
A cloud of dust, leaving a sticky yellow slime all over her car. It happened again last February, and calls began pouring into the local Alpenhorn newspaper.
And they had a tremendous upsurge of children that were not going to school at that time.
I asked them, what are they doing, spraying these chemicals on the public? I said, there's a violation of United States Code 50 USC 1520, which prohibits the American government from experimenting on the U.S. citizens with chemical agents. I said that law also requires who's ever experimenting, when the federal government does it, that they have to report to Congress within 30 days. They wrote back, they said they don't know what I'm talking about. We have enough evidence that there's a spraying going all over the place.
NASA has also conducted a research program in what they call metallized fuels. We're actually putting aluminum oxide right in the fuel because it has 2 atoms of aluminum and 3 atoms of oxygen. So during the combustion process, it releases all that oxygen and dramatically increases efficiency, but it leaves the aluminum in the air.
We got things coming from sky down, and it's a huge, huge problem. Because as it comes down, what happens is a couple of things. Is that it actually is in our air, we breathe it. And as we breathe it, it's actually going to go up through our nostrils, into our brain, easiest access to our brain frontal lobe. The contaminants that have been identified, which already been mentioned, are aluminum. Aluminum is the #1 free radical generator to the brain to cause early apoptosis, which is early death of brain, and it begins to set off the scar tissue, which we call the amygdalin, which is part of the chemical matrix related to Alzheimer's.
I'm a neurologist practicing in Reading for 17 years, and in the past 5 years, I have seen the number of patients with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases tremendously increased, almost quadruple. As you heard, to spray nanoparticles, very small particles, basically trigger a programmed cell death in the brain. And that is the ultimate path we see in Alzheimer's.
ADD started in the 70s. Autism was not on the radar. There was no documents, there was no information. It was 1 in 100,000 children. Today, what we have is 1 in 48 boys. I was part of the early group that was looking for aluminum in ADD and ADHD. And all of those children that started to develop those phenomena had high levels of aluminum. When we figured out protocols to detox them out, to free the body of those particular contaminants, what happened is that their brains came back. When we do this to the age, it doesn't come back as quick, but it will come back. But I'm seeing Alzheimer's in 56 years old. Back in the 70s, Alzheimer's when you were 80.
If you remember 8 to 10 years ago, there was this big move to get rid of aluminum from underarm deodorant because it would cause Alzheimer's. Look what they're doing to us now.
I'll give you a little bit of history on the background behind nanoparticles has been described before. A nanometer is 1/billionth of a meter. It's very small. In fact, if you have particles, say, that are 40 or 50 nanometers across, you can take and line 50 of them up next to a single red blood cell. These things are extremely tiny. They're pervasive.
The collapse and decrease of agriculture is something I worry about even more than the previous info about autism and Alzheimer's. Insects. I've done studies in Siskiyou County. They're at 20% of normal. The aquatic insects basically made a nosedive in 2006 to about 20% of normal. So far this year, I've sampled 200 trout stomachs. 98% of them are empty. So sorry about the trout fishing, fellows. The mayflies, stoneflies, dipterus, and caddisflies are damn near gone. The terrestrial sampling is down to about 20% of normal, except for pest species like ants. We're seeing a loss of the major bird species, and as the gentleman said, the ecosystem is unraveling, and Audubon's been telling you that for years.
The materials that are going into the environment right now, aluminum oxide nanoparticles and barium nanoparticles, these just happen to be the same materials that they use in nanothermate explosives. And so when this stuff settles down out of the air into the environment, it is small enough to be absorbed through the root structure of the trees in the forest. And so when there's a forest fire, and there will be a forest fire, those fires burn dramatically hotter. The point is that the cost of firefighting, the cost in the healthcare system have nearly doubled in the last 10 years. The amount of acreage is lost because of fires. The impact on human health is dramatic.
I personally tested water and aluminum, and I found aluminum had 47 times the normal expected amounts. Strontium had 10 to 20 times the amounts. Barium was 20 times. This is what the stuff looks like here. Collected, it looks, most people just think it's a cobweb, but I tested it, it has outrageous amounts of barium, strontium, and aluminum, but they destroy the sample, so I'm not letting this get away from me.
I'm unable in my garden to restore normal pH, and that's because nanoparticles are now in the circulatory systems of both plants and humans.
The Air Force conducted a study starting in 1993. It was called In Vitro Toxicity of Aluminum Nanoparticles in Rat Alveolar Macrophages. That's a real fancy way of saying testing the effect of aluminum nanoparticles on the white blood cells in the little air sacs in your lung, the alveoli. And what they found in this 8-year study was that these particles, when you're exposed to them long enough, it suppresses the ability of your white blood cells to defend you from airborne infections coming into your lungs. So it suppresses your immune system. But they also found that these same particles, once they get into your system, they can actually go through the barrier in each one of the cells. They get inside the cells, and these particles can actually suppress the ability of mitochondria, which are in the cells that help to gobble up toxins and things that would be harmful to the nucleus and the reproduction process of the cells in your body. These processes are suppressed, and so essentially by breathing this material in, your immune system is dramatically suppressed.
What is geoengineering for those that are not yet familiar with this issue? Geoengineering is climate manipulation on a global scale. It's the attempt to manipulate Earth's life support systems. It involves a number of various layers. The largest and most visible, of course, is the saturation of the atmosphere with reflective, light-scattering metallic particles. This is called solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol injection. Climate engineering, although the stated purpose, again, is to block some of the sun's incoming thermal radiation. That's what solar radiation management is that I mentioned earlier. But of course, it traps heat as well and does everything else I said. Shreds the ozone layer, disrupts the hydrological cycle. It's like the pharmaceutical cure for planet Earth. How many commercials do we see now that state, take this for that, and by the way, there's 50 other side effects that are worse by far than what you're trying to cure. The next commercial is usually an attorney telling you who to sue. So climate engineering is shredding the ozone layer. We're seeing UVB levels that are as much as 1,000% higher than we're being told. We're told by all major agencies that no more than 5% of all incoming UV should be UVB, and no UVC. We're getting slight UVC readings on the surface, which we're told stops 100,000 feet up, and we're getting UVB readings that are 60%. It's burning the bark off of trees. About 150 patents exist. They don't give patents if there's not a functional process going on. So those that think that the climate is not damaged, that if climate engineering stopped, everything would go back to normal, this is not reality. It's simply not reality. The single greatest mathematical effect on the Earth's climate system today is climate engineering, and there's no legitimate discussion of the climate without including climate engineering first and foremost. Weather warfare. In Thailand refused the U.S. a military base that they told Thailand was for weather monitoring. The Thai government apparently knew it was for weather manipulation. They refused the base. Thailand immediately found itself underneath record floods. We know and have proof of chemical ice nucleation for snowstorms. The Chinese government stated it openly. Mainstream media covered it. For any who care to look, Google Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorms. The Chinese government openly admitted this till they did $1 billion worth of damage to Beijing, $1 billion with a B. So we know this is going on, and when you have climate engineering, you cannot separate that from biological warfare. You cannot. So we have a climate science community that is either clinically blind, in total denial, or lying for a paycheck. How can you have the largest scientific panel in human history, the IPCC, 2,000 climatologists, that cannot recognize this atrocity in our skies? How is that possible? So the degree to which academia has been hijacked and compromised is hard to believe at this point. How much technology has been suppressed in order to keep the fossil fuel paradigm going? How much? We don't know. We can't know. Populations also have to take some responsibility because the power structure, the military-industrial complex will never, ever admit defeat. Never. They will keep this machine grinding on until there's nothing left. It's their mentality. Never do they admit defeat. We must reach our military brothers and sisters who are being told they're doing something for the common good with the aerosol operations. That's what they're being told. I know that's what they're being told. I've talked to a KC-135 pilot. I've talked to a few other people. We must reach them and make them realize they are killing their own along with the rest of us. They're not helping, they're hurting. So I salute our military brothers and sisters. But I was told, one more note on this, I talked to an insider with these programs. I can't release his name, but I published the conversation. And here's what he said. The government will never disclose these programs because they know if the public found out, and I'm quoting, they would find those responsible and shoot them in front of a firing squad. They know how the public will react to this. It's up to us to expose it. The atmosphere is as thin as a layer of paint on a basketball. Try to get your arms around that. That's what allows us to live here, and how many take that for granted, and how long can you experiment with that and still survive on this planet? And we're about to find out. If this continues, we're about to find out. If the insects die and the trees die, we'll be right behind them. I assure you, we'll be right behind them. And all are dying. I know and love trees. My father was an arborist, and they're dying everywhere. Everybody needs to try to help others to clear their lens. We need to open our eyes because we are literally careening down the side of the canyon now, not a decade or two away. It's happening now. Mathematically speaking, the top scientists on the globe right now have told us On the current trajectory, there will be no life left on Earth by 2040. But these top 80 scientists were just excluded from a methane meeting in the UK because media and governments don't want that out. These methane scientists state this, again, the overall consequences of climate engineering. Methane is releasing from the Arctic right now. Climate engineering has made this worse, not better. This shouldn't be a surprise. When you interfere with Earth's natural systems, it makes things worse, not better. So the latest observations from the Arctic, we're seeing methane plumes 150 kilometers wide. Methane's entering the atmosphere. There's enough methane there to mathematically cause a Permian-style mass extinction 100 times over. Climate engineering has altered upper level wind currents. That's altered ocean currents. Now we have warm water pumping straight into the Arctic. We have a shredded ozone layer. Why? People ask why. Why would they do this? It's about power and control. It's always been about power and control. Until we say no, it will always be about power and control.
Trees are down in the sky. This hazy shade of chemtrails used to eat up the earth. Chasing all our rain away, what is left? They make us pay for recycling crap. Yeah, they turned off the tap.